Hello, I'm Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, two criminal cases with connections in several cities, including New Orleans and Los Angeles, were in the news this week. We'll investigate the troubles of Robert Durst and Darren Sharper and how the local legal system has responded to both. Much more uplifting were decisions made on the development of the World Trade Center and the mayor's proposal to fight crime in the French Quarter. We'll examine these stories tonight, plus a reporter's conversation with Tom Benson. And a chef has an anniversary with a BAM. At our table are tonight's Informed Sources. Errol, Laborde, producer of Informed Sources. Mike Perlstein, investigative reporter, WWL-TV Channel 4. Larry Holder, sports reporter, NOLA.com, the Times-Picayune. And Jacquetta White, reporter, the New Orleans Advocate. And we're going to go over to Errol first. And the mayor has an idea to try to help combat crime in the French Quarter.
Yeah, if you recall last year, that horrible crime when there was that late night what appeared to be a random shooting and one person was killed in the incident. And according to the mayor, that's what really got the gears moving in terms of, I mean, people have known that there's a problem that they had to deal with, but to try to get a plan. And what the plan that he's proposing is a quarter-cent tax, a sales tax, and then there's going to be some matching funds too from the Memorial Convention Center, from the Tourist Commission, and from the Marketing Commission. And actually, those three, the Memorial Convention Center and all those, a lot of their funds comes from tourism also. Mm-hmm. So in a sense, there's already tourism money that's in place. And what the mayor is willing to do is to use this money to be able to get 45 state troopers on a more or less permanent basis, at least as long as this program, I think it's set for 5 years. Mm-hmm. And then there's also a Part B of this plan where I think it's 8 New Orleans police will be put on overtime duty, and that's being paid for by private enterprise. And so the idea is just to put more police on the street. Nobody likes to approve taxes, for taxes, but of all taxes, the kind that is most agreeable to people is one that you vote on to have somebody else pay, and especially when it's tourists. It's not even people in your own backyard. So politically, I think this has a pretty good chance. We've already seen in the past, not just in New Orleans, but anywhere else, if you go somewhere and you look at your hotel bill and you see all the taxes that are tagged onto that, it's the same sort of thing. It's hotel, motel taxes that have been used for some kind of service. The voting on this is going to be in October, and it's limited to people who are registered voters within the French Quarter. And so, if I lived in the French Quarter, especially if I didn't own a business that wasn't affected by it, why not vote in favor of it and then, have tourists pay a little bit more? I mean, it won't just be tourists. I mean, it would be everybody who uses the French Quarter. So this could have a good possibility. And
so the need for the state police to be there in the quarter, I mean, part of it stems from the fact that we have such a shortage in our police force, right?
That's right, yeah. That the police department really hasn't caught up yet with the manpower need. And so putting the state police, and Mike, this is really a newer role for the state police. I mean, for the longest time, the state police were really traffic cops, and now they're people that are really, on patrol and fighting crime.
Well, quite a few troopers are familiar with New Orleans by coming down for the major events, helping during Super Bowls, out every carnival. But this will put them there on a more permanent basis where they'll really have a close working relationship with the existing officers. One thing that should be noted, of course, is that, it's Landrieu's fix, but it's also Landrieu's problem. For the first term of office, he did not hire any officers, and that has led to the manpower shortage. So, people tend to gloss over that fact that he's the one who put himself in this situation. Also, it's sort of a kitchen sink, anything that can help this problem. It's citywide, of course, but with some major tourist events coming up, and of course, the 2018 tricentennial, I think they're very acutely aware that any sort of tourist killing mishap really would be a serious PR blow. So, in addition to the state troopers, like you said, they're boosting it with existing NOPD officers on overtime, and there's also a citizens patrol that's going to be paid for by businesses, and that also should expand just the presence of law enforcement.
And there's also a little bit of anger by the police unions that are saying, well, why don't you use this money for raises for your existing police officers? So that's going to be a touchy point, too.
Right, and they're the ones who also point out that, hey, if you'd have been hiring officers all along like we told you, we wouldn't be in this pickle.
So this proposal by the mayor then has to go to council, and council then has to put it on the ballot. Is that
right,
correct?
in the October ballot, right?
Okay. Do we have state police in the quarter again? I mean, I know they're off and on for special events, but are they back in the quarter now again?
Yeah, well, they were on this extension. It keeps getting extended,
Yeah.
and now the hope is to get them there, without having to keep coming hand in hand to the superintendent of state police, which needs governor's approval. It costs money. It costs the state money to send them down here, and it takes away from their normal duties, which is patrolling highways across the state.
And have we really seen an uptick in crime in the quarter for to have this concern?
We've seen an uptick, particularly in robberies, and robberies are it's a sensitive crime because those are usually stranger crimes. It's not two people with a beef who know each other, and that's where your tourists are most susceptible. Wrong place, wrong time, opportunistic crime, and anybody could become a victim. It really, we've seen the bad PR that comes when a tourist, is a victim, and we want to avoid that.
We should admit there's a new program in place, what's called Polaris, which is these mini units which are being funded by city tourists, and so that's in place, and it involves app technology. But anywhere in the world, I mean, you go to the Colosseum in Rome, and people warn you to watch out for the pickpockets. I mean, anywhere in the world where you have a high tourist areas, tourists of all people are the most susceptible.
Right. Okay, Errol, thanks a lot. Let's move on over now to a story that has more than just a New Orleans element to it, but also L.A., maybe a little bit of New York, and this is Robert Durst. You were there in the courtroom the other day when he was there.
I don't think I've ever seen so much presence of outside media, CNN and HBO people, L.A. Times, New York Times, because this is a celebrity defendant, Robert Durst, 71 years old. And, in the eyes of many, especially after the HBO special, The Jinx, he's perceived as the man who got away with murder. Right now, he's locked up he's held by Orleans Parish Prison, but because of his medical issues, including mental health issues, he's being held at Hunt State Penitentiary, where they can have proper medical care for him. But he's being held here because he was arrested on March 14th, pursuant to an arrest warrant out of Los Angeles for murder, for a murder in the year 2000 of a woman named Susan Berman, who was a very close friend of his. And now that this HBO special came out, in which he muttered the words to a hot mic while he was basically talking to himself in a bathroom, some people are saying that the words I killed them all,
It is,
was a basic confession to murders that they were never able to make stick on this guy. He was tried and acquitted of murder in Galveston, Texas, of a neighbor who he admitted killing.
Right, I mean,
claimed self-defense.
Right.
Even admitted, in that case, dismembering the body, multiple parts, bagging them up, throwing them into Galveston Bay, and yet was still acquitted.
And just a fascinating case, but why are local authorities, why are they holding him? And he will be in court again next week, and if you can just kind of concisely tell us what's going on there.
Well, when he was arrested at the JW Marriott on Canal, in his hotel room, they found, in addition to a mask and $40,000 in cash, they found a loaded gun and about 5 ounces of marijuana. So those were the basis of local charges. Now what we're going to see on April the 2nd in criminal court at Tulane and Broad is a preliminary hearing in which the defense gets to attack the underlying premise for the arrest and the evidence. In this case, it turns out that they were just going up to his room to check his ID and look at a passport. They see the gun and the weed during what they called an inventory of his belongings. No search warrant at that point. So his attorneys, very capable, high-priced attorneys from both California and Texas, they're going to attack that, and you may see those local charges on shaky ground, which simply would mean if the local charges, in this case, fall by the wayside with a finding of no probable cause, he'll go straight to Los Angeles, where he's awaiting a murder charge.
Why do we even want him if he's wanted for murder somewhere else?
That's a good question, and Leon Canizero, the district attorney, has never really come out and said why, except what we have heard just through people around his office is that he's just playing this one by the book. if you're caught in my jurisdiction with a gun and 5 ounces of marijuana, I'm not just going to turn a blind eye and let you go. Think of all the people, who would look at that and say, wow, the rich white guy gets off, and look at all the people every day who get caught with the same thing. So he's just kind of going by the book. You're found with a gun and weed in my jurisdiction, you're going to get the charge.
So he remains in jail at Elaine Hunt in St. Gabriel, no bond.
Right, he's held without bond here as a flight risk, and of course, in the hotel room, they also found, the trappings of someone who had an eye to escape, including a map of Cuba, cash. He was there under an alias, Everett Ward.
Yeah, and a UPS package that had $100,000
and
in
let me
it.
tell you, he came this close from, getting out of here. They really got lucky. It was the FBI who ultimately made the arrest.
Okay. We'll be seeing what happens with Mr. Durst next week
It's
in
going to be
Orleans
another
Parish Court,
packed
criminal
house
court.
of all kinds of, tabloid media in addition to the local press.
And focus on it. Thanks a lot, Mike. Okay, Jacquetta. Finally, we do have somebody who's a group that has been selected to do something with the World Trade Center to put it back in commerce.
That's right. A city selection committee picked Carpenter and Company and Woodward Design and Build to put a Four Seasons at this dilapidated building in one of the most valuable plots in the city. But I'll walk you back a little bit because now the tough part begins, the negotiation. And if you remember, the city went through this about 2 years ago when it picked another company that wanted to put a W in the World Trade Center and negotiated with them for about 6 months before telling them to take a hike because they wouldn't raise the offer they were making to the city. The city put itself in a bit of a better negotiating position this time, making sure that it gave each developer that it was negotiating with the opportunity to present a best and final offer before they selected who they wanted. They gave them copies of a lease, told them to mark it up, so the city knows what these guys are putting on the table and is ready to negotiate and believes they can get it done before March 31st.
So does the city feel like it is really on firmer ground now as they begin these negotiations? Because while this group has been selected, they still have to negotiate.
That's right. They've seen the lease agreement they want to offer. They're expecting to have that lease in place agreed upon by March 31st, which is when the New Orleans Building Commission meets. And after that group meets on the 31st, it's going right to the council. So this is on a fast track, much faster than before.
It certainly does seem to be going on a fast track. So describe, what are they going to do?
Yeah, so this will be a mixed-use development. It'll be a hotel and also condos. That was different than the other proposals, which had proposed apartments, at least for the first 5 years. This will be hotel-serviced condos. 350 hotel rooms, 76 condos on the top floors. They're also going to add 2 buildings, one on either side of the existing structure. One will have a parking garage, one will have restaurants and some retail, and then there'll be a deck on top of the World Trade Center where you can go and look out, an observation deck, and also a digital cultural museum, they're calling it.
A digital cultural museum, and that is going to be in the main building?
In the main building. It'll be curated by Harvard professor Henry Louis Gates, so it could be an interesting feature.
And then what about outside? Are they going to be adding also some components outside?
They're adding 2 buildings. They had also proposed at one point to use the World Trade Center parking garage, but they won't use that. It'll have its own parking. And there's various other landscape features.
So when you're talking about the deck, I mean, a lot of people remember that building for the revolving restaurant on top. Is that what the deck would be, or is it something added to it on top? Or
it'll be a 2-story cupola and an outdoor observation deck. There'll be a spire on top. But no, this is different than the revolving restaurant.
Did they talk about that space, that revolving restaurant space? Or?
Not exactly. I don't know that it'll be a restaurant again. There will be 2 restaurants on the site, though.
We've come a long way away. Remember a couple of years ago, the talk was about tearing the building down, and people united and said, no, we want to keep this building. And so the building that's been part of the story, is actually the saving of the building.
That's right. Since the last time the building has been listed on the National Historic Register, that doesn't prevent it from being demolished, but it makes it a lot tougher to tear it down. And I think the public sentiment is clear that they want the building to stay.
And the plans are for the building to stay as a Four Seasons hotel.
As a Four Seasons hotel, that's right.
All right, thanks a lot, Jacquetta. All right, Larry, over to you. You had a chance to talk to Mr. Benson. So what was your impression?
Yeah, last time I talked with him, it was literally a year ago from the event. I was in Phoenix for the NFL owners meetings. The last time I talked to him was at the same event, and this was in Orlando. And when I was in Orlando a year ago, I asked him, questions about the team, this, that, and the other, and sure, he's 87 years old, and yet very sharp, jovial. It's something where he knew, he's on top of what's going on. And then, of course, you go a year later, He fell at the other owners' meetings when New Orleans lost the Super Bowl. Then the secession plan, the battle in court, and he's had multiple knee surgeries, and now there's the big question is, is he mentally capable of making decisions to change the secession plan over to give all of his sports empire and the business empire to his wife Gail, and taking it away from the 3 R's, Renee, Rita, and Ryan. And so when I went into the interview, my main topic, well, not topic, but I just wanted to mainly observe how he was, because that's the big question. And look, I thought he was the same guy he was a year ago. On top of things, thoughtful answers, thought out answers. And I just wrote today on our website, look, I don't think when you're an 87-year-old man, if you're not mentally there, you can't just turn it on for an interview. A lengthy interview, 15 minutes, where you're asking questions and you're giving answers. I don't think you can just turn it on and then turn it off, and then all of a sudden you're this guy who doesn't know who the president is. You're Harry. You think it's Harry Truman, and for things that he's being accused of. So look, I think I'm no expert. I'm not in the medical field. I'm a columnist, but to me, he seems certainly capable of making decisions, and I don't think anyone's pulling the strings. When the subject of the legal battle came up, you could tell he's hurt by it. You could tell that. I don't think that's just an act. This is not what he wanted to do ultimately. He probably felt like he was pushed to do this by some things that are going on behind the scenes, and you could tell he's genuinely not happy that he has to do this, and hurt that he has to do this to his family.
Did he talk about it? Did you all talk about it?
He did, yeah. That's why I knew. Just because he said, look, people have problems in life. Some are bigger issues, some are smaller issues. And he's like, and I have a big problem here. But you can't, even though it's a sensitive subject, look, he wants to fight for what he feels is right. And that's what he feels like he's doing. And he knows it's an unfortunate thing, but he feels like everything that he wants to move over to Gail, he feels like that's what he wants to do.
As you mentioned, over the past year, he has had some health issues and some knee difficulty. So what did he look like physically in terms of his health, his physical health? And did he have any assistance with him?
Well, he was there with his wife, Gail, who did actually attend owners' meetings, which is different than what normally happens. Usually the spouses, they'll have activities for them. But she attended the meetings by design because he wants to get her acclimated. Now, he's traveling around with nurses. They're not in nurse gear. They're just in plain clothes. And of course, Gail is to his side, but he's in a walker. And he showed up in this van. It's like a SWAT team van. It was like the biggest van, but to facilitate everything he's bringing with him as far as walker. And then there were other Saints officials in the van, so it wasn't just like a 2-person van. But no, he does need assistance. I mean, there's no question about it. Because his knees, they've been surgically repaired a couple of times within this past year. So he certainly needs assistance, and he's not as mobile as he used to be. But the fact that he was there and he was being active within these meetings, because he's not on committees anymore. He used to be head of the finance committee within the NFL owners. He's not that anymore. He stepped away and stepped back. And actually, Rita used to be on committees, and now she's not.
How's this playing with the rest of the NFL? Do you get the feeling that, do they like him? Are they behind him? Are they supporting him? Or?
Oh, I think the NFL is absolutely behind him. And you go back to the press conference that Roger Goodell had during the Super Bowl, and he was asked about him. And look, people feel like Roger Goodell hates New Orleans. He hates Tom Benson. He hates the Saints. Roger Goodell was firmly behind Tom Benson. And I feel like all of the owners within the NFL and just, you talk to other general managers, coaches, people around there who are from other teams. And look, everyone's in support of Tom Benson. They feel like if he wants to make a decision to make the change, he can do it now. I mean, you still got to go through the legal hoops.
And some of these owners may have their own family situations and family issues.
Well, a lot of these teams they're entrenched in family. Look, Jim Irsay, he's had his fair share of problems in Indianapolis, and his daughter, they had to take over the team. And look, a lot of these are team connected. You look at in Pittsburgh, the Rooney family. Look, a lot of these are family oriented, companies that they're running. So,
but to your observation and your Q&A with him, he's engaged.
Absolutely. There's no question. There's no question in my mind. No.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Larry. And okay, still talking about the Saints a bit, but this is about a fallen Saint, Darren Sharper. Can you explain what's going on now with all of these pleas, Mike?
Well, yeah, you know, the big story is that Darren Sharper has not fallen as far and as hard as people expected, considering he was charged with rapes in 4 different states, 9 different alleged victims. Well, now he's one at a time started to plead guilty pursuant to plea bargains. First LA and Arizona, then Las Vegas. In a week and a half, he'll be here in New Orleans to plead in 2 separate cases, one in state court to 2 different rapes, one in federal court on drug charges. With all of these cases, the allegations were that he slipped women an Ambien-like drug to basically knock them out and proceed to sexually assault them. What is really opening eyes is the prison terms that he's been getting so far basically amount to 9 years behind bars. Considering, you know, at 9 victims in 4 states, you know, over a 6-month period or more, it looks like a serial rapist. But 9 years is considerably light.
And would that apply to Louisiana cases too?
Well, we still have to see exactly, you know, what the years are going to be. It's going to be in that range, but
these will be served concurrently.
They will all be served at the same time.
Right.
Now, it is our understanding that is his preference and the preference of his attorneys that he serve the time in a federal penitentiary, which is usually a little better than a state prison. You know, you're in with more of the white collar and older inmates. So that'll probably be the last case to go. He'll come here to state court, plead to, again, pursuant to a plea bargain, whatever, reduced charges. You know, he was facing aggravated rape, which carries a mandatory life sentence here. So obviously they're going to come down considerably from what he was charged with. Now, the things that him and his attorneys may have had as leverage would be 2 different things primarily. One is that he's got co-defendants here in both the federal and the state case. So you would presume that any plea bargain requires him to cooperate, to tell everything he knows, implicate the co-defendants, and even testify against them if it comes to that. One of them is a former St. Bernard Sheriff's deputy, and that's both in state and federal court. So it could be Darren Sharper's turn to take the witness stand, you know, as a government witness.
And so he will be in both courts when he comes to New Orleans. He will be
Correct.
making appearances in both courts.
Right, it looks like state court first, followed by federal court. Now, the one other thing that always goes into these calculations is how strong were these cases really? You know, rape cases are often tricky. You know, there aren't sort of a line of witnesses like a street crime. It's usually behind closed doors, a he said, she said. But interestingly enough, it looks like the New Orleans case emerged as one of the stronger cases because there were images that were texted to a friend, at least one friend, that really implicated Sharper in a big way.
And we anticipate guilty pleas also next when he comes to New Orleans, correct?
Oh yeah, no, it's all
It's
set.
This is all part of this global deal.
It was a global plea bargain, barring some dramatic 11th hour surprise. He's set to plead guilty. That's the purpose of coming to court and bringing him here. The big question is going to be, what charges is he pleading to and how much time? It's going to be in that neighborhood of 9 years. It might actually kick up a notch to 10, but not much more than that.
Real quick, on a side note, I was at the NFL owners meetings. That was a huge topic. A lot of people asking about Darren Sharper. I've talked to many teammates who are disgusted, and then they see that he may only get, say, 9 years, and people who used to work with him and coach him and employed him, they're wondering how on earth can that only be.
Everybody is shocked.
Right.
But
And
again,
it
he
has to be
came
so
in.
disheartening to everybody too, and we're going to have to move to the next section. And you gave us a great transition too with Kick It Up a Notch, because I know Errol wanted to talk about Emeril and his 25th anniversary.
Well, the point is, I think the point of the 25th anniversary is that a man named Dick Brennan died last week, and when the Brennan family bought Commander's Palace, they really made it into a major restaurant, and it became, I think, in sports terms, sort of like a training ground, or certainly a farm club over the years for prominent chefs. Out of Commanders came Paul Prudhomme and Emeril Lagasse. Both of whom became something new. I mean, New Orleans had prominent chefs, but they became became nationwide celebrity chefs. In the case of Prudhomme, not so much for his name, but because of his dish, his blackened dishes and his blackened redfish. And then Emeril, because he went on television and he was able to do the Bam and the Pow and to really talk to a different type of person. Really popular in firehouses around the country with his food and with his technique. And so we did see the emergence, really, through the Commander's Kitchen of this type of chef. And he has several restaurants. He has 3 in New Orleans. In fact, NOLA, it was reported, that's his restaurant in the Quarter. That's where Mr. Durst had his last meal as a free man last Saturday night. But some food critics have been critical of him and said, look, the guy's a chef. A chef belongs in the kitchen. You don't see him. But I remember talking to John Besh one time about what he thought about that, because John Besh, like Emeril Lagasse, is an entrepreneurial chef. And I said, what do you think about people criticize him? Should he be in the kitchen more? And Besh says, Emeril Lagasse liberated me. I mean, Emeril Lagasse proved that it's possible to be a chef and to still go out and have a life and to talk about food and create new dishes and create new places and create new concepts.
And he really created changes in cooking shows, too. And we are running out of time right now. That's why I'm kind of speeding you along right now. But congratulations to Emeril on his 25th anniversary. And thank you for all the good meals, too. We're looking forward to a whole lot more. Okay, now it's time to look ahead. Back to you, Errol.
On May 2nd, there's going to be a millage proposal for the library. They're asking a 2.5 millage renewal. It expires after 25 years. I mean, the 25 years is almost over, and so it needs to be renewed. And this sounds like a do or die thing. They're saying if it passes, they can keep all the libraries and most libraries open every day. If it doesn't pass, they're going to have some severe cutbacks.
Okay, that's pretty serious. Okay, Errol, thanks. Mike.
Yes, coming up April 20th, we have the 5th anniversary of the BP oil disaster, the explosion, of course, the major oil spill. That's going to be, of all the numbered anniversaries, probably the most attention, and because there's still oil in the Gulf, active litigation, you're going to see a lot of coverage of that. WWL-TV is going to go all out with stories that'll be rather eye-opening.
Are you looking forward, Larry?
I'll keep it short and sweet. Pelicans, if they miss the playoffs, they only have a handful of games left. What's the future of Monty Williams and Dell Demps? I think it's fair to question their future after going 3 seasons with Anthony Davis and possibly no postseason.
Okay, thanks. Good job.
March 31st, we'll know if the city and the World Trade Center, the new developers, have come to an agreement. It'll be presented to the New Orleans Building Corp.
Okay, I thank you guys for being here, and I thank you all for joining us, too. And, we want to see you next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.